So this is my session on advanced theme settings. We're going to cover some, mostly Drupal 7, but we'll also take a look at Drupal 8, what's different. So that's me. I'm Eric Huffman. I'm a senior front-end developer with MediaCurrent. I've been with the company, just started last summer, so I've been there about 3.5, 4 months. I spend my days in the theming department, just doing theming and other front-end goodness. My background is more in design and illustration, but I've been working with Drupal since Drupal 6, about 7, 8 years ago. So I have a natural inclination for the front side, the front end of Drupal, but I've also been thrown into the back end enough times that I can tread water. MediaCurrent, if you're not familiar with us, we're located here in Atlanta. We've probably about over 50 people there now at the agency. We're a full-service digital agency focused on Drupal. This is a client list. We help companies adopt Drupal, and some recent projects that launched. Travelport is one. That was a really neat site. Of course, being new, these are projects that I didn't really get to touch, but I got to see some of the behind the scenes and some really neat stuff going on there. Manhattan Associates is another site that launched that was done in Drupal 8. So, what's that? I don't control that slide. I'm just the new guy. But yes, we have done some work with Georgia Tech as well. So, advanced theme settings. What we're going to cover today, we're going to just kind of talk about what are they. I don't know if anybody here has ever messed around with creating your own theme settings in a theme in Drupal. But I'm going to kind of show you how you can do that if you're interested in giving it a shot. We're going to look at how it works in Drupal 7 as well as Drupal 8. I'm going to cover some best practices, some issues and bugs that might come up, as well as cover some use cases. I also have a live demo. Here's some links to some themes that I set up. It's a Drupal 7 version, a Drupal 8 version. It's just a very simple theme out there on GitHub that I tried to document very, very well so that you can kind of get an understanding of how things work and give it a shot on your own. And then, of course, we'll have some Q&A time. So what exactly do I mean when I'm talking about advanced theme settings? Well, as you can kind of see there, this is a screenshot from the Drupal defaults page. So I'm sure everybody's kind of gone to your appearance page for your theme, and you've seen these global settings where you can toggle a main menu, primary menu, secondary menu, site name, et cetera, et cetera. And these are sort of the core features that come out of the box with Drupal. What they essentially do is create variables that are available in your page template or your node template, and it's mostly just used by core themes. If you turn on Bartik, and if you turn off the main menu, you'll notice that Bartik straight out of the box, the main menu, the horizontal menu that appears above the main content area, that's going to disappear. It toggles those menus and other elements of the site. It just basically gives you an option so that if you want to drop the menu, use a block setting to drop a menu into a region instead of just using where it's sort of hard-coded in, the theme settings give you that option to turn it off because you'd want to place it somewhere else. And of course, these settings are mostly respected by the core themes. Most people, other themers I talk to, they really don't use them or make use of them at all. But the one benefit is that you can, for a beginner with Drupal, it is kind of an easy way to sort of toggle things off and on without having to worry about going to the blocks page and deal with and get sort of an understanding of how you drop things into a region and what pages they want to display on, etc. So then we can take a look at some of the contrib themes, and you'll see, like with Zen, another theme that I'm sure a lot of people have built off of before. It's got some additional customization, if you can kind of see there. You're probably already familiar with this, that you can set up how the breadcrumbs displayed is one great option. It also has some accessibility settings, browser support for older browsers, as well as some development tools. And I think breadcrumbs is a great example of a good use case for custom theme settings, because breadcrumbs are one of those things that are kind of hard to, if you want to customize those, it's a lot more sort of code writing, and so creating a nice interface to, don't display the breadcrumb as well as what the little Icon's going to be between elements. This is definitely a good use case for the custom theme settings. And then, of course, we have like a heavy hitter like Omega, where it's heavy use of advanced theme settings. There's extensive layout and development tools, browser compatibility tools. With all these different settings, almost like filling out. It's almost like TurboTax or something, going through here and entering everything. But it's a great example of.
It takes a while.
Yeah. Not as good user feedback either, but it's a great example of sort of the base theme playing the role of this kind of like configuration engine that you subtheme off of, which is another great use for advanced theme settings. Okay, got it. So how does it actually work? Well, in Drupal 7, your settings are declared in your theme info file. Here's an example of just setting up a custom theme setting. You just have it's just sort of like the key value pair. You declare the name of your setting and then the value of that setting. And then you can retrieve them just by running the function of theme get setting and then the actual name of the setting. So you could like set a variable to be the value of that my setting and then output that variable on your page template. So here's kind of a roadmap of how everything works. So you've got your my theme, your info file, where you create your setting, and then in my template file, I might do some page preprocessing where I create that variable, and then down there on my actual page in the markup, I can output that variable. So like if I wanted to set up a modifier for that class, which is going to use the setting, I've got a drop-down list with different color values, then depending on what's selected in that drop-down list will be output as the modifier on that class there. In Drupal 8, it's a little bit different. Your settings are not actually included in the info YAML file. Like, it's not just one file where everything's included, your regions and everything else. You actually have to create a second file that lives under this, the root level themes directory, your theme, config, install, and then the my themes, or your name of your theme, and then the settings.yaml. And then to create your settings, that's the straightforward syntax there, the YAML syntax. And then you also have to have a schema file in there too, and it's a similar path to where the actual settings file lives. And the schema file, I'll show you in a second here the format for that. And I'll be honest, I'm not really sure what it does, but it's got to be there so that your theme settings will be available and be saved. You get the settings, pull the settings out of your file just the exact same way. Function's the same. Theme gets settings. So here's again roadmap of how everything works. Very similar in Drupal 8. The function names, the preprocessed settings or functions are the same. The only difference, of course, now we're working with Twig, so we output the variable a little differently with the double curly brackets versus actual PHP. Here's the actual example of what the schema file would look like. It's very simple. You just have to have your theme name .settings, and then the type is theme settings, and the label, just whatever appropriate label is for your theme. So that's great. I mean, you can go ahead and set up these variables. You can pull them out, output them on your page. But in order to create that user interface so that your site admin can go in there and make selections in the theme settings to alter the look and feel of your theme or whatever settings you've got included, you'll need to have the theme.settings file in your theme. And basically, this is where you just set up the configuration for that form on your theme settings page. So all you're really doing in that file is you're dropping in this form alter hook, the name of your theme, form system theme settings alter, and then inside of that, you drop in the different form objects that using Drupal's form API to set up a drop-down list or a checkbox or whatever you want, kind of settings you want to include with your theme settings options. And this is full access to the Drupal form API, so you can set up validation options. You can set up file uploads. It's pretty much whatever you want, as you can have seen with like the settings for Omega. You can go nuts with it if you want to. So here's an example of just the code that you would write to set up a simple checkbox in your theme settings file, and it's pretty basic. You just kind of declare what the form element is, give it a title, some values, and a description. It's pretty straightforward. It's not too scary if you've never done this before. It's actually a really great way to kind of dive in and learn some of the Form API basics in Drupal. And this is pretty much the same in Drupal 7 and Drupal 8, the theme settings file. There is, of course, the Form API has changed in Drupal 8, so you do have some, like, if you want to do some more of the advanced things like some validation checking or file uploading, you definitely consult with a developer that's well-versed in Drupal 8, because my attempts of trying to get that to work, the validation kept running into some problems. So, but it's pretty much straightforward, the same thing as how you would do it in Drupal 7. One of the other great things about creating your own custom theme settings is it hooks in really nicely with a lot of the multilingual options that Drupal has. So if you were to install like the full internationalization suite of modules, I've got a link here to the handbook on Drupal.org where it kind of gives you an overview in Drupal 7 of how to set up a multilingual site. You have an option in there once you've got everything turned on, in this multilingual settings, you can actually, there's a variables option, a table where you can select what sort of core variables on your site you want to be like eligible to be translated. And one of those is the theme settings. So if you enable the realm, they call it, which would be your core theme settings, then everything that you set up in your form, your theme settings form, is translatable. Well, of course, you do have to wrap it in the T function, the translate function. And then you can also, when you're setting up those variables that you're going to output on your page, if you do the same thing, if you match sort of the value that you create in, like, say, a drop-down form for the option in a select list, if you match that same value when you're creating your variable on your page and also have that wrapped in the T function, it'll be translated as well. And I'll kind of show this in my little live demo here, how that would work. And it basically, you're not just translating the user interface of that form where people are selecting the options for their theme. You're actually also able to translate, what's collected from that form and output onto the screen in one shot. So to do that setup, you actually have to go into the translate interface options in some of the multilingual modules, and you search for the string that you want to translate. So you'd search for the string that you set up in your theme settings form, and then provide a translation for it. All right, so easy enough. We can start diving in to showing you off how all this stuff works. But before I do that, I do want to go over some best practices. Some things I've learned when creating custom theme settings is you kind of want to avoid duplicating other core settings. You don't want to confuse your users. So, there's already like settings for site information or under the site information page, site title, or if you're going to use the site slogan. Those things are kind of baked into the, on the site information side. So if you're recreating those things on your theme settings side, you could run into a situation where somebody's trying to change the, if you're using that to output the title on the header of your page, you could, somebody's trying to get in there and change it. They can't figure out which setting they actually go to change it. So I would try to just keep it simple and introduce new settings and not try to override existing ones, especially if that site admin is going to have access to those existing settings. If you've ever downloaded or bought one of like a theme for Drupal, and a lot of times you open it up and you go, everything's in the theme settings page. So you've got your home page, slideshow, all this other stuff, and I mean it works, but it's not really kind of the intended purpose. So it kind of limits you, and it doesn't really make those elements of your page very scalable. And when it's time we want to change things, they're not very flexible or scalable. So just be cautious of doing that kind of thing with your theme settings. And again, sort of on the same line, you don't need to put everything in there. Just kind of keep focused on, it's the theming layer we're talking about, so stay focused on sort of look and feel. Of course, the exception being like Omega, where you're just creating that configuration engine that you sub-theme off of, then I think that's again, go nuts. Just covering some quick issues. You've probably experienced this yourself if you've ever messed with sort of the core theme settings. They're kind of finicky. They don't always work. Or it's just kind of a weird, unexpected combination of what you have to have on versus like if you try to hard code a core, what they call features, theme features in your info file, and then you want to be able to override that as well with the in the interface. Things don't really line up. One thing I've tried too is also on the actual theme settings page for my theme is I just want my settings. I don't want those global ones that are for the entire site that always get added on there too. So through the form API, tried to unset those form elements, and then when I'd save the page, it kept getting this persistent error, and it turns out there's a bug in Drupal 7, and everything gets saved okay. You just get the scary red error box. So your site admin might be a little worried about that. It's just a little annoying. So one of the things it's not, I guess it's a little hacky, but one thing I like to do is just go in there and in that form element, just add a class to those field sets that contain those global settings and just hide them with CSS. It's not going to hurt anything, and you won't get that scary error message. And if you are going to do file uploads in your theme settings, just be aware of making sure that you're setting up those files to be what I guess is called a managed file in Drupal, where you're kind of associating that file with a user account. If you don't do that, it will be seen as a temporary file, and then every time your cron run comes, it cleans that stuff up, and suddenly your file's vanished. So here's a link to a thread on Drupal.org that kind of explains how to set that up, and it's just adding a few extra little tidbits to your theme settings form so that it makes sure that file stays put. In Drupal 8, I think a lot of things kind of got cleaned up, so that logo upload option is like really only available under the global settings. Site name field is gone, site slogan, a lot of this stuff they've just kind of eliminated, and at first I kind of thought, oh, there's something buggy here, but I think they did that on purpose. So I mean, and for most of the times where I've used theme settings, I'm glad to see that, because a lot of those things I just don't use. And if I did want to actually unset those form elements through the form API, it will actually work without getting a scary error. And then one other thing to consider too is that you do have to give a specific person permission to a user so that they can administrate the theme settings. It's not one of those ones that's scary. It's going to give them all kinds of deep access to the site. So usually it's not a problem. Again, just cover some quick common use cases. I think more or less, since we're talking about the theming layer, providing skin options is basically a great way to make use of custom theme settings, and it's kind of, in some cases, it kind of eliminates the need for a sub theme. If you're creating like a theme for a corporation, and maybe they've got like franchises where they install the sub theme to get the look and feel for their particular division or whatever, that can all be just kept in one theme, and then you use theme settings to make those variations. Also a great control mechanism for kind of keeping things branding compliant. If you're giving some people some options, but you're kind of locking them down, it's a great way to be able to lock them down so that they can't go nuts and upload, alter their own colors and everything. They can use different colors, but only a certain set. And another use case too, if you ever wanted to do, I've done this before where I'm making sort of a single page site. I just use Drupal straight out of the box, no additional modules. Use the theme settings options to give them, like, one example was setting up a one-pager site for, like, you drive down the street and you see the sign on a house for sale. It says, go to 480peachtree.com. Well, a straight Drupal site out of the box with theme settings for my custom theme. Right there, I can just set up fields for, they want to update the price, they want to update the date of the open house, they want to update, drop in like a Google Map link or something like that. It's just a straightforward, simple way to set up a quick site that somebody can go in and change the specific settings for that one page, and then you can quickly clone it over. So it's if you have like a real estate agent that's gangbusters and they got 20 houses on the market, they can just use that same site, and like in a multi-site situation, and have each separate domain for each property goes to this real simplified site that's all controlled through some custom theme settings. And of course, the configuration engine also is a great scenario. Okay, so let's dive in here.
Eric, I got a question.
Sure.
Can you also turn off the options for like the posted by? Because I feel like that's always something I'm always turning off in every single site.
Right. Well, it's just doing in the theme settings. There's like that setting to show user, like show whether they're anonymous or not on a post. Right. And that's, yeah, you can turn, if you turn that off and you're using like a default node template, it will respect that setting. But, you know, and then on per node basis, you can, or content type basis, you can also turn off some of those things. But not really, not, you know, just what's kind of applicable to the theme settings. But I mean, I guess, you know, with the access to the form API, you could go in there and do some hacky stuff and mess with other things. But okay, so here's what I've got up there on GitHub right now. This is my theme for the Magically Delicious Corporation. Let's see, do I have the? I got it in there's Drupal 8 and the Drupal 7 version, very similar. So we'll switch back to English here. So if I go to my settings page, you can see what I've set up here. We've got, first this is kind of the box that gets added to your theme settings automatically if you install the multilingual options, where it lets you, if you've got it turned on, you can, you know, go between each language and change these settings. So if I go to the French version of the site, I see this certain color. If I go to the English version, I see another color. So here's just some, if you can see this okay, just some different options that I've set up here. So if we want to select the flavor for our Magically Delicious Corporation site, we can select from blue diamonds. We'll switch to purple horseshoes here. And we are actually the sugar procurement division. And we're in the southeastern United States. And then I set up something like an option to sort of like copying the core themes where you can decide where you want the menu to display. So I can save configuration, go back to the home page, and if you can even tell the color difference, you know, I changed the skin color of the site, and then of course this is outputting the different division name that's based on the theme settings. So there's no worries about going in and, you know, that if this might be set up with a block or something like that. No worries about trying to go in there, get to that block, save it, tell that block where it's supposed to be and the right what page and right location and everything. It's just kind of a straightforward way to eliminate a lot of those needs. So I'll show you some other options here. So to give you an example of, well, here we can add, we actually have some leprechaun mascot variations we can add here. So got Smiley McSmiley, Smiles, I can't remember what I named these things. Here, we'll change this the surly leprechaun. Go back home, and there you go. We're branded with the surly leprechaun. So as you know, I was an illustration major in school, so anytime I have an opportunity to draw stuff, I'm all over it. So use my magic leprechauns here. And then to give an example of user feed or providing some feedback. So if we were to switch to a different leprechaun. We now have Tipsy on our page. If we switch back and we say, you know what, we want to put the menu up top, save, then I get this error. So it just gives me a notice here that putting the menu above the Tipsy leprechaun may cause some adverse effects. You proceed with caution. So we go back and, there, Tipsy's having some trouble keeping his green clovers down there. So let's see. So of course, let's see, we could actually switch to the French version. And we'll go green. You know, and here's the example of where I've translated in my theme settings. I've actually translated or set them up so they can be translated. What is it? You know, appears in the user interface, and then I'm using that same value to actually output it in the page template where it's the header of the site with the title. So it will get translated as well. You don't have to worry about, you know, I'm not just translating the interface, I'm using those same values so that it, you know, actually will get translated as well. Drupal 8, it's very similar. The only thing I wasn't able to include in the Drupal 8 version is just that validation checking. So if you select the top menu and the Tipsy leprechaun, you don't get that error message or anything. But you can actually, you know, go in there and take a look and see sort of the differences of how things are set up. You know, it's very similar, and you can also see how clean the page template file is in Twig versus PHP template. Let's see, I think that's it. So that pretty much is it. Covers a live demo. Feel free to download those themes and break them, do whatever you want with them. I'd love to hear any feedback you have of if you found it useful or got any suggestions. That'd be great. So just to wrap it up here, so advanced theme settings are a handy way to control the look and feel of your site while still giving some user options. Can possibly be a way to eliminate the need for a subtheme. As far as if you're going to make use of them, I would just follow those best practices and stick to sort of the look and feel and try not to duplicate any other setting that's already there and confuse your user. And there again are the links to the themes on GitHub. Please feel free to download and break them. And that's pretty much it. Any questions? All right.
I have one question.
Okay.
The international module, how is the translation generated with that?
Well, I made up my little pseudo-French translation. So, yeah. I mean, you can actually, install a language for your site, and that will cover a lot of the user interface elements. So I'm the admin. I'm logged into the site. A lot of those menus will be translated to, if I've installed the French language to the site, that'll be translated. But I went in, and let's see, where was it? Oops. So like here, it's still kind of, so I was starting to look for Leprechaun. So here's my Leprechaun arbitration setting. So I actually created my own little arbitration de les Leprechaun version of that title, which, it's not just, I can set up so it's not just translating the interface, it's also what's used on the actual header of the site. So it's, translates everything in one shot. Any other questions?
When you're talking about messing with theme settings that already exist, such as like the site name, stuff like that, can you at least move them around and kind of like make them, like some of the theme settings in tabs as well sometimes? So can you move things around and like kind of reorganize that page?
As far as like the interface for, yeah, absolutely. It's like in the screenshot I had for Omega, they're using the horizontal tabs or whatever. You can do a lot of that. And actually, when I was messing around with some of the Drupal 8 options, there's a lot. Like there's some differences. There's now like the details element instead of, so if you wanted to have before you just specify a field set, then you could just say, okay, I want this field set to be open or closed on default. Now it's like a details element. Field sets are just, you can't open and collapse them. So there's some changes to Drupal 8. But yeah, you could go through there. You could even do your own, add your own CSS to that too, and really style it out if you wanted to.
So moving that stuff around, changing the field sets for like, I don't know why you'd ever do it,
right.
But say you put site name and site slogan in a field set with some block music. Right. That wouldn't break the original settings?
No, I mean, those are just kind of independent. Those are the theme, those are stored with the theme settings. So those still exist on the other page if you go to the site information page. But that's one of the things I was saying, like if you're going to do that, you just make sure that you don't, like your site admin doesn't know anything about that site information page and they just keep going to the theme settings page to make those changes. Otherwise, they'll be sitting there at that site information page hitting save over and over and over. Like, why isn't this changing? Why is this like, oh, I get it. I have to go to the theme settings page.
Just take it out of the menu, maybe?
Yeah. Take it out of the menu or, just lock them down.
All right. What are your thoughts on theming 8 versus 7?
Well, actually, it's kind of funny because I just started kind of tinkering with it earlier, like in the summer. And when I went back to this to get ready for this presentation and started working on the theme again, like stuff wasn't working anymore. Like, I guess, you used to have, what was it that got moved around? Well, I guess the theme settings, they actually used to always be in that same kind of info file. Now it's a separate file. It has to stay in a certain location. But actually that works really well because one thing about the Drupal 8 settings, if you've got your theme turned on and then you turn it off, like you have to, it's almost like reinstalling a module, like it kind of wipes it clean again. So if I turn my theme settings off and turn them back on, like everything is reset. which is kind of nice. But yeah, I mean, as far as like on the actual like building the pages and the twig and all that stuff, at first it seemed a little like overwhelming, but once you kind of get in there and get the hang of things, it's definitely a lot nicer, a lot cleaner. I don't know. Is anybody else themed in Drupal 8 yet? Done much theming in Drupal 8? No, not you, Zach? Yeah, I've just kind of tinkered so far. Once I kind of figured out where things go and how things work, it's like, oh, this is pretty cool. Okay. Thanks.